welcome back. Last time around we worked on the Spectravideo and we were going to have a look at the 80 column card, but that video sort of evolved more into a power supply repair of the super expander. But I did say that in the next Spectravideo video that I'd run through the process of creating a set of disk basic boot disks for the system, in case you're in a situation like I am where I've acquired the system but no floppy disks came with it. So we'll get into that and yeah, let's make a start. So the process we're going to work with here is we're going to start with a cassette file. So it's a disk file representing the contents of a cassette tape. And well, first things first, we need to download it. So there's 3 different versions of the file here. They're all the same thing. They're just more recent revisions of the same thing. So we'll download version 3, the most recent one. And that .cas file has, I think, about 20 different, maybe even 25, 30 different files in it, which are used to create the disks. So now that we've got the cassette image file, I probably should explain a little bit of what we're going to do with it. So the cassette image file is basically a digital representation of what used to be on an old school analog cassette tape. And I was originally going to write the cassette file out to an analog cassette tape. I acquired a tape deck here specifically for the purposes of doing that. And yeah, I was going to write it to an audio cassette tape and play it back through the Spectravideo's cassette player and do it that way. But really that's quite an ask for some 40-year-old technology when you've got to read 25 odd minutes of computer audio data. You've got to read it back flawlessly. And you know, that's a big ask. So, you know, I did try it. I didn't have a huge amount of success. I got as far as creating a disk that booted, but yeah, it wasn't a complete image and wasn't a very good experience. So I've been meaning to buy one of these SVI CAS hardware cassette playback recording units for a while. And so I decided this was the time to actually do it. I spoke to Duncan, the gentleman who makes these. He's in Victoria here in Australia. It's one state above where I am. And I placed the order and the unit arrived literally overnight. He was a wealth of useful advice, I've got to say. And once he worked out what I was planning to do with this, which was to use it to create floppy disks to boot my system from, he mentioned, the supplied cable won't work. And the reason the supplied cable won't work is because it's fairly long this way. And where the cassette port is on the back of the computer, the super expander that holds the floppy disk controller pushes right up towards the back of the computer. So you don't have a lot of room for a big connector like this. So yeah, Duncan gave me the heads up that, oh, by the way, the supplied cable that I bought with the SVI CAS isn't going to work. Normally that's not a problem because, as Duncan pointed out, 99% of the software that you might want to use on the SVI, like by way of games and things like that, comes on cassette. You don't need the 80 column card, the floppy controller, or even the super expander connected. So for most use cases, this is fine. But in my case, I needed the super expander in order to connect up the floppy drive so that I could write the disks. So I ended up going to the local electronics store, which for us here in Australia is usually a JCAS store. There are others, but JCAS sort of the one that's everywhere. And I found this connector. I can't remember specifically which one it was, but it's kind of Molex-like. And with some judicious use of the Dremel, because it had these dividers between every pin, with judicious use of the Dremel and a small drill bit, I was able to clean out these sections here. So this would push onto the edge connector, and I left the divider there to mark the polarity as it goes onto the edge connector on the computer. So it was a bit of effort, but as you can see, that is a lot smaller than the supplied connector. So for what I was using it for, this will work quite well. Down the track, if I'm playing games on the machine, without the super expander, then I'll just absolutely use the beautifully made cable that I bought with the unit. I keep saying it was supplied with the unit. It doesn't come with the unit. You order the adapter cables you need to go with the unit, but in my case it was supplied because I ordered this with it. So yeah, I'll be using that in future, but for this particular exercise I needed to cobble together my own. So that the SVI CAS can play back the file, we need to put it on the SD card. So we'll pop that in our SD card reader. All right, so copying the image on is a simple matter of just drag and drop. It's really that simple. And we will eject that, and that's done. And put that back in our SVI CAS. And we're ready to go. So the first thing we load off the cassette image is the disk formatting utility. This is the standard Spectravideo disk formatter, and we need this in order to format the blank floppy disk that our disk basic image is going to go onto. Now that it's loaded, we specify which drive we want to format, and in my case I only have the one drive, so it's drive number 1. Something to note here, if you inadvertently put a write protect disk in, it'll just hang at formatting track 0, leaving you wondering why. I found this out the hard way. Now at this point we hit Control-C, and the system will ask us to put our original system disk back in the drive, which we don't have because we haven't created it yet, so we just hit a key and the system will reboot. Now at this point we load up a copy of Disk Basic, and it hasn't asked me to press play on the tape because the tape was paused from when I loaded the last file. So now our Disk Basic's loaded and it's automatically restarting into that version of Disk Basic. As we can see, Disk Basic version 1.0. Now we load up the disk imaging utility, which is the next file in the cassette image. And we run it. Now we need to select option 5. This sets the file name of the disk image files on the cassette image. And then we select 7 to start the restore. And at this point, the imaging software is just going to silently read each image file from the tape. As it reads each one, it'll pop up and show that it's writing the relevant tracks to the floppy disk. And here we go, it's read the first image file out of the cassette image and it's writing the first 4 tracks to the floppy disk. It'll repeat this in groups of 4 tracks until the image is complete. Now that it's written all 40 tracks to the disk, it does a verification pass where it basically reads each sector off the disk, and I assume it's computing a checksum of some variety, and it'll verify that that matches what it expects here at the end. There we go, we've written a Disk Basic boot disk successfully. Okay, so now we'll boot the machine from the Disk Basic disk that we just created. And there it is. Well, that's a run through on how to make a Disk Basic boot disk for the Spectravideo SVI 328 from the cassette image file that's available on Facebook. If you found the video interesting and like what you saw, then feel free to do the YouTubey things, that, subscribe, like, leave me a comment or two. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you next time. Oh, and by the way, here's a sneak peek of the 80 column card actually working, just to prove that it does. Cheers. We can switch to the 80 column card. That's width 80, change to the right output, and there we go.